Shalom in the precious name of our Lord and Savior Yeshua. This is Jenkins Sahayam. Thanks for joining me for this session 2 of Genesis part 1, focusing chapters 2.4 to 5 in the book of Genesis. In the previous session, we covered the creation account of the scripture, in which we were introduced about the creator Elohim, the creator of this entire universe, who fashioned it over a period of 6 days to rest on the seventh day, which he sanctified. We also learned how important observing it would play in his believer's destiny, in that the Sabbath was given as a sign of the covenant. While the previous chapter introduced us to the Elohim, which is a title of power or might, this chapter names the identity of the Elohim as Yahweh or Yehovah. Also, while the previous chapter narrates a general picture of creation, this chapter rather focuses on a location within a location, which is about the garden eastward of Eden, as we will find shortly. Genesis 2:4. This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens. Before any plant of the field was in the earth, and before any herb of the field had grown, for Yahweh God has not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. And Yahweh God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Here the Hebrew word for formed is yetzer, which means to fashion out of something. Here in this case, man was fashioned out of the dust of the ground, which is Adama in the Hebrew language, and hence man gets the name Adam, because he is fashioned out of Adama. And the Hebrew word for breath here is neshama, which refers to the breath of air from the nostril of God to the nostril of man, in order to give life to man as he becomes a living soul, which in Hebrew is nephesh. So in the previous chapter, we saw how God made man out of his own image, out of his own likeness. But here we find how exactly he formed man out of the dust of the ground. Yahweh God planted a garden eastward in Eden. The Hebrew word Eden means fertile. And there he put the man whom he had formed, and out of the ground Yahweh God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now we get a fair idea about the subject of description in verses 5 and 6. The subject being the status of Garden of Eden, which had no one to till the ground before Yahweh God planted anything there, and a mist from the earth watered it. Now he has planted and put the man whom he has formed inside the garden in order to take care of it. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first one is Pishon. In Hebrew, Pishon means bounds. It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, which in Hebrew means stretch of sand, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The Hebrew word for onyx is shoham, which other translations have rendered it as lapis lazuli, which is a blue colored precious stone. The name of the second river is Gihon, which in Hebrew means to gush forth. It is the one which goes around the whole land of Cush, which is believed to be the Ethiopian region of present time. The name of the third river is Hiddekel, which is understood to be Tigris in the modern era. The name Hiddekel means rapid. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria, and the fourth river is the Euphrates, which is still there in the present day. And the name Euphrates means to breach. Then Yahweh God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. So this verse once again repeats verse 8 in that God puts the man whom he has formed inside the garden now in order to tend and keep the garden. And Yahweh God commanded the man, saying, You shall surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. So this is the first commandment of warning given to man as recorded in the scripture. The actual Hebrew translation would be translated as dying you shall die, that confirms a certain death. This concept of death because of transgressing God's commandment is consistently repeated all through the scripture. Deuteronomy 11:26-28. Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your God, which I command you today. And the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of Yahweh your God, but turn aside from the way which I command you today. Again, it's repeated in Deuteronomy 19 and Deuteronomy 30. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. In that I command you today to love Yahweh your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and Yahweh your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. Again in Deuteronomy 30. I call heaven and earth as witness today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. So this is again and again, it's a continuous concept that consistently we find all through the scripture. So all that we can understand from this is that obedience to God's commandment brings us blessing, and transgression of the commandments brings the curses, which brings death. One important warning that God gave while he gave his commandments is that he warned not to add to his word or remove anything from it. We find this in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and chapter 12. You shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your God, which I command you. Back to Genesis, verse 18. And Yahweh God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground Yahweh God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. Here the Hebrew word for helper is eser kenegdo, which signifies an active intervener on one's behalf. Also with corresponding strength and power, a savior and sustainer, and co-equal in every aspect. So Eser Kenegdo is more than just a helper. Verse 21. And Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which Yahweh God had taken from man, he made into a woman. And he brought her to the man, and Adam said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Now the word translated as rib in Hebrew is tselah, which actually means something, an overhang or a side. So it doesn't necessarily mean a rib, though it is understood to be so and translated likewise. And the Hebrew word for man is ish, and woman is called isha because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Here, the Hebrew word for one is echad. As we saw in the previous session, it could mean a numerical one, or it can also mean a compound unity, which is more than one, making one, as we will find shortly. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Here the Hebrew word for naked is eromim. So echad could mean either a numerical one or a compound unity. Why understanding the echad is very important is because the most important doctrinal creed of the scripture is given in Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. Here the Hebrew word one is, again, it's echad, which could either mean a numerical one or a compound unity. Let's see how this is reflected in our faith in Yeshua being divine. John 1:1-14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light, that was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Here the Greek word for only begotten is monogenes, which signifies a unique kind. Now pay close attention as to how Yeshua is Yahweh in relation to this echad. Just like how the woman was part of the man in the form of his rib before her creation, then taken out of the man to form a separate Ezer Kenegdo, which we saw as an active intervener on behalf of the one from whom she was taken, and then brought in union with the man to become one flesh, which is echad, thus making two beings constituting one echad flesh. Here also we find the Word, which was with God, being God and part of God, would descend from heaven, put on flesh, and dwelt among mankind in the form of Yeshua. Thus, Yeshua is Yahweh in flesh, while serving as an Eser Kenegdo, which means an active intervener on Yahweh's behalf, thus constituting an Echad of compound unity with Yahweh while still being distinct from Him. This is why Philippians 2 states, "In your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Messiah Yeshua, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross." As far as the institution of marriage as an union between man and woman, thus becoming one flesh, its importance is reflected both in the Old Testament and New Testament. Malachi chapter 2 verses 14 and 15. "Because Yahweh has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant. But did he not make them one, having a remnant of the Spirit? And why one? He seeks godly offspring." So here the Hebrew word for godly offspring is Zerah Elohim, which is also translated as seed of Elohim. An interesting link we will find shortly. So the reason why God made the husband and wife as one upon covenant is because he is seeking this Zerah Elohim. Also, in the New Testament book of Mark, we find Yeshua's reflection on the institution of marriage as he rebuked the Pharisees for their misunderstanding of the law of divorce as given by Moses. "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate." Now to chapter 3 of Genesis. "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that Yahweh God had made." Here the Hebrew word for beast is chai, which also means living beings. "He said to the woman, 'Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?' And the woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die.'" Now, this is very important to note. We know that this commandment of not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was given to Adam by Yahweh at a time when Eve was not existing. And the commandment he gave was not to eat from it. He never said not to touch it, which means Adam has put a fence on God's command for Eve by adding to his word. This sets the stage for the serpent to take advantage of it, in that he proved before her that touching wouldn't kill, and thereby cast doubt in her mind regarding the word of Yahweh. This is the reason why we are warned not to add to his commandment or to remove anything from his commandment. "But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die." And Proverbs 36 also warns us, "Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and you be found a liar." Here the Hebrew word for serpent is nahash, which also means a shining one or a diviner. And the word for crafty or cunning is the word arumim, which is a wordplay of the word aromim, which means naked. For a proof of the serpent being called a nahash, which also means a shining one, we can appreciate this fact in Numbers chapter 21, verses 8 and 9. Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, shall live." So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. Here the Hebrew word for fiery serpent is seraph, and the bronze serpent and the serpent which Moses made is the word nahash. So both nahash and seraph is understood to mean the one and the same. Also in Isaiah chapter 6, we read about the vision of Isaiah. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." So the Hebrew word nahash, that is translated as serpent, also means a seraph, which indicates that it could well be a celestial shining being. And the serpent continued, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She developed covetousness first, and then she developed an appetite, and then she enacted it. So, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. This is a very important scenario, because we are even warned in our New Testament. For example, in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, 3, 4 and verses 13 to 15. "But I fear lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Messiah. For if he who comes preaches another Yeshua, whom we have not preached, or if you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted, you may well put up with it." And Paul identifies who such people are. "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostle of Messiah. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light." How does he know? Because just we found that the word nahash could also mean a shining one. So therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. So Paul warns in the New Testament of the believers of their risk of following another Yeshua or another spirit or another gospel contrary to the truth. So if we don't know who the true Yeshua is, or if we don't know what the true spirit is, or if we don't know what the true gospel is in line with the scripture, we are doomed to be trapped by the craftiness of the serpent, which is Satan. Galatians 1 6-9. But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaches any other gospel to you than what you have received, let him be accursed. And in Deuteronomy 13, God warns his people about false prophets who could lead them astray by strange doctrines. If there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or wonder comes to pass of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods. Here, God could be understood to be might or any other power that has authority over us, which you might have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For Yahweh, your God, who is your authority, is testing you to know whether you love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after Yahweh your God and fear him, and keep his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. But that prophet or the dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken in order to turn you away from Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which Yahweh your God commanded you to walk. So this is very, very important. Mere miracles doesn't qualify a person to be a true prophet. Here we find even the false prophet. He is capable of doing miracles and even prophecies to come true. But how do we distinguish between a false prophet and a true prophet of God? It's based on the obedience in which he will guide us in line with the scripture. This is also reflected in the New Testament. Revelation 13:11. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Here this speaks of the imagery of the false prophet. He looks like a lamb, which means he resembles Yeshua. But he spoke like a dragon. And who is the dragon here? Revelation 20, we find the identity of this dragon. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon. Who is this dragon? That serpent of old, who is devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And how did the dragon spoke to Eve? He casted a doubt in Eve's mind by asking her if God really said so. And when God has warned them that they will surely die, the serpent said, you will not surely die. Time and again, we are warned in the scripture to be obedient to the commandments of God, failing which God warns us of certain death. Whereas the spirit of the false prophet, who resembles Yeshua but speaks like a dragon or the serpent, in that he proclaims, you shall not die, for the very acts Yahweh warns us that we will die, which is the transgression of his law. So we have to be very careful in subscribing to false doctrines that teaches people to not be obedient to the Torah or the law of God, saying that it has been abolished. So any spirit that teaches so is that of the false prophet, as warned even in our New Testament. And they heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh God among the trees of the garden. Then Yahweh God called to Adam and said to him, "Where are you?" So he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" Then the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." And Yahweh God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." So when they realized they were naked, which could mean their spiritual condition of transgression as well, they tried to cover themselves with fig leaves. When God questioned them why they did so, we find Adam putting the blame on God for giving him Eve, and Eve putting the blame on serpent for her transgression. Yahweh God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." This is the first curse, promise, and also prophecy we see in the scripture. That is, the serpent is to feed the dust its entire life, which carries a significance in that the serpent gets the dominion over man because it is this very dust from which man was created and the very thing to which he will return upon his death. But God also prophesies about the coming seed of a woman, which is to give a fatal blow to the head of the serpent, thereby getting the dominion back to man, in the process of which his heel would be bruised by the serpent. So the entire context of the rest of the scripture is about this seed of the woman. Who is he? Why should he come? Which lineage is he going to come? Where is he going to come? When is he going to come? What is he going to accomplish? And how he is going to accomplish. Back to Genesis chapter 3, verses 16. To the woman he said, "I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children, and your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." So God is very clear that it should be the husband who should rule over his wife. Then to Adam he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, You shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. But both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return." And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Here the Hebrew word for Eve is Hava, and the word for living is Chai, which is the same root form as that of Eve, which is Hava. Now to verse 21. And Yahweh God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skins and clothed them. This is a very significant thing to note. We saw Adam and Eve covered their nakedness with fig leaves, but God himself here makes a garment out of skin, which means an innocent animal, unconnected with sin, had to be sacrificed here in order to clothe the nakedness of sinful man. Then Yahweh God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now, lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever." Therefore, Yahweh God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So here we find God admitting that man has become like one of them, which means he is speaking with the Godhead, which constitutes the Echad. In that, man has become one of us, knowing good and evil, which is in fact a true statement made by the serpent when he said to the woman that they will become like God in knowing good and evil. Also true to his words, they didn't die. But what we can infer is that in spite of man's transgression, Yahweh is long suffering in that he prolonged their life by atoning them through a sacrifice which covered their nakedness and prolonged their lives. Although they would die eventually because of their transgression, because Yahweh would prohibit them from reaching out to the tree of life, which until then was within their reach to sustain them with life forever. In a way, it is good that God intended man should die for his transgression. If not, man would have had access to the tree of life and lived forever in rebellion to Yahweh, just like some of the angelic beings. Also, the very fact that Adam and Eve didn't die that day and would go on to live for 900 and plus years, as we will see shortly, prompted the psalmist in Psalm 90 to declare that 1,000 years for God is like a day, in which case Adam died before he could cross 1,000 years. Proverbs 3:18 associates wisdom, which is understood to be the Torah, as a tree of life. She, that is the Torah, is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who retain her. What does this teach us? Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but the things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. So we have to be content with only what is explicitly commanded for us in the scripture to attain eternal life, than to look for some unscriptural mystical insights, which is forbidden. In the future new heaven and new earth, in Revelation 22, we find that the tree of life will once again be accessible to human beings. And it's very important to note verse 12 to 14. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. So the tree of life will only be accessible to those who obediently follow his commandments. Ecclesiastes 12:13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. This is the reason why Yeshua makes it very clear in Matthew 5. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Also, Yeshua warns in Matthew 7, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. This is a stern warning by Yeshua, because any spirit that entices people from following the law of God is not the true spirit, but rather another spirit that preaches another Yeshua and another gospel. Which is why John the Baptist and Yeshua rebuked such people as brood of vipers. Now to Genesis chapter 4. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from Yahweh. The Hebrew word for knew is yada, which has sexual connotations. And here it is interesting, the phrase is translated as I have acquired a man from Yahweh, whereas the Hebrew actually could only be translated as I have acquired a man, Yahweh, which could mean that Eve was expecting her very child to be a man, Yahweh, which is in line with the Zerah Elohim concept we saw in Malachi. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. The Hebrew name Cain is from the Hebrew word kaniti, which means acquired. The Hebrew word for Abel is habel, which actually means vapor or vanity. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Yahweh. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Yahweh respected Abel and his offering. But he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. Here the Hebrew word for respected is yesha, which has the same root word of Yeshua, which means salvation. The reason why Yahweh didn't regard Cain's offering is that it could be because of Cain not bringing the blood sacrifice as intended by God, or his jealousy towards Abel. Either way, Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. Now Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then Yahweh said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So now you are cursed from the earth. Compare with the curse that God put on account of Adam's transgression. He cursed the earth, but here we find that Cain is cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. A fugitive and a vagabond you shall be on the earth. Cain, instead of correcting himself when Yahweh advised him, he was rebellious and stiff-necked to the extent of harboring hatred with his brother and killing him. And Cain said to Yahweh, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." So he doesn't seem to show any sort of remorse here. "Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, and it will happen to me that anyone who finds me will kill me." So, who are these people whom Cain fears? Well, he could have feared Adam and Eve or his other siblings, as we will see shortly. And Yahweh said to him, "Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And Yahweh set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. So the Hebrew word for mark is ot. This mark signifies a divine protection. To the left is the pictogram of the Hebrew word ot. Pictograms are the original letter form of the alphabet, which evolved itself into the present-day square script. So the Hebrew pictogram consists of three pictures: the ox head, nail, and crossed sticks, which could symbolize a sacrifice nailed to a stick. We read about this divine protection also in Ezekiel chapter 9 and 4. "And Yahweh said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." Here, the Hebrew word for mark is the Hebrew word tau. Tau is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the pictogram of which is a crossed stick. So the mark that was set on the people of God for a divine protection is that of a tau, or a crossed stick. Again, in Revelation chapter 7, we find, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads." So the mark of God offers divine protection to both the wicked as well as God's servants to carry his purpose. Then Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. Now the question comes, from where did Cain found his wife? Obviously, he would have married one of his own sister. "And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begot Mehujael, and Mehujael begot Methushael, and Methushael begot Lamech." And the Enoch here is not to be confused with another Enoch who is a descendant of Seth. And so is Lamech not to be confused with the Lamech who is the father of Noah. Then Lamech took for himself two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. So we are beginning to see the emergence of polygamy. Here, Lamech is violating the principle of monogamy that Yah intended. For Yahweh created one woman for the man and not multiple women. And Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in the tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the harp and flute. And as for Zillah, she also bore Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Then Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, "Hear my voice, wives of Lamech. Listen to my speech. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold. We saw God's grace equally being given to the wicked and the righteous, in that He offers His divine protection to both. Whereas the righteous will pursue righteousness on account of the grace they were offered, we are seeing here that the wicked will turn His grace into committing more transgression. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and named him Seth. For God has appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. Then men began to call on the name of Yahweh. This means the entire lineage of Cain went away from Yahweh, and they never called upon his name. It's only the descendants of Seth who would call the name of Yahweh. Now to chapter 5 of Genesis. This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, He made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female, and blessed them and called them mankind, that is, Adam, in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. The name Seth means appointed. After he begot Seth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he had sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enosh. After he begot Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Enosh lived 90 years and begot Canaan. After he begot Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. Canaan lived 70 years and begot Mahalalel. After he begot Mahalalel, Canaan lived 840 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Mahalalel lived 65 years and he begot Jared. After he begot Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. After he begot Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and he had sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. This indeed gave rise to the speculation if Enoch would have not tasted death. But given the instances where certain saints were teleported to other places in the scripture, as in the case of Elijah or Philip, and the oral tradition of Enoch's teaching of righteousness as attested in the New Testament book of Jude, and Yeshua's assertion that no one has ascended to heaven except for him who has descended, we can conclude that Enoch could well be teleported to another place in order to warn the inhabitants of the earth regarding the coming flood, because his son's name Methuselah means that his death shall bring the flood. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Methuselah lived 187 years and begot Lamech. After he begot Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years and he died. So Methuselah was the longest ever human being to live on earth. Lamech lived 182 years and had a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which Yahweh has cursed." The Hebrew name Noah means comfort. Seems like the generation of Noah were desperately looking towards his birth to be the promised seed of the woman. After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It may look weird as to how these people could live so long in those days. Well, it could be because of divine protection given in order for man to multiply across the face of the earth in its initial period of creation. It's interesting to note that as we look at the genealogy of Adam to Noah, the meaning of these names seem to give us a cryptic message. For example, Adam, Hebrew name means man. Seth, Hebrew means appointed. Enosh, the Hebrew name means mortal. Canaan, the Hebrew name means sorrow. Mahalalel, the Hebrew name means the blessed God. Yared, the Hebrew name means shall come down. Enoch, the Hebrew name means dedicate. Methuselah, the Hebrew name means his death shall bring. Lamech, the Hebrew name means despairing. And Noah, the Hebrew meaning is comfort or rest. So altogether, if you read through it, it means man appointed mortal, sorrow, the blessed God shall come down and dedicate his death shall bring the despairing comfort or rest. So this would set the stage for the restoration of the Eden-like environment once again, as we see in Isaiah chapter 11. There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall go out of his root. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. His delight is in the fear of Yahweh, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor shall not decide by the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his loins, and faithfulness the belt of his waist. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the young lion and the calf and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young ones shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox, the nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole. And the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den, they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall stand as a banner to the people. For the Gentiles shall seek him, and his resting place shall be glorious. Isaiah chapter 2 verse 3. Many people shall come and say, "Come and let us go to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem." And this is what is prophesied about the Messiah. Isaiah 42 verse 21. Yahweh is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will exalt the law and make it honorable. This ends Genesis Part 1, Session 2. This is Jenkins Sahayam signing off. Join me next for Genesis Part 2. Shalom.